Welcome, one and all, to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, it is good to be with you once again. Obviously, we are very happy to be with you, as always, here on the Hammer Territory Podcast, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. And as always, it is a pleasure to be with my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, how are you doing tonight? A busy day for the Braves, a busy day across baseball. Excited to get to talk with you about it once again.
Yeah, what's up, Shawn? Yeah, we knew today was going to be a busy day. I mean, it's on the calendar. It's a deadline day. Deadline spur action is always the saying. And, it's funny that it was an 8 p.m. Eastern deadline. We got to standardize some of these deadline times. I swear to God, it's a different time every day and every year. And sometimes it's 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. We got to standardize these deadlines. But yeah, we knew it was going to be a busy day. And it was a busy day all over baseball. It was a busy day for the Braves. Typical Braves fashion, they waited till an hour after the deadline to announce anything. Probably the last team in the league to announce all of their stuff. Just tremendous work by Alex on that. That's just so on brand. And not a ton of surprises. We'll get into the specifics, but I don't think there was anything stunning that happened. Once it took so long to get out, people were, wondering if they've got trades or something brewing. But at the end of the day, it was pretty standard stuff. We'll talk about all the specifics here in a second, but on the whole, I didn't think anything was terribly shocking. And now we kind of get to start the actual offseason where the money has been cleared. And now we get to start seeing how they're going to add back up this team for 2025.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it came down to, right? It came down to what we've kind of seen the theme of the offseason be so far for the Braves, which has included a couple of moves and once again was confirmed in multiple ways today, which we'll get into in a bit. But it's about clearing as much money as possible. And that's exactly what the Braves did with their deadline decisions today. What occurred today was the non-tender deadline. Now, I'm going to let Stephen break that down a bit here in just a second. But the details for the Braves read as this. 7 players were decided upon today when it came to their 2025 contracts as of right now. The 2 who were decided upon that were going to remain with the Braves, in other words, they were tendered contracts, was Dylan Lee as well as Jarred Kelenic. Dylan Lee is probably going to make around 1 to 1.5 million, somewhere in there in 2025. Jarred Kelenic a little bit north of 2 million, but pretty sensible, decisions by the Braves to tender both of those players' contracts. It was the players who were not tendered contracts where I think much of our discussion is going to be on this edition of the Hammer Territory Podcast. The Braves decided to non-tender Ramon Laureano, Griffin Canning, Roy Solanas, Ray Kerr, as well as Huascar Ynoa. And I think that the 2 biggest names of all, Stephen, of that group is Griffin Canning as well as Ramon Laureano. And it's not just because of those 2 players, of all that we mentioned, probably having the longest, resume of success, if you will, in Major League Baseball, but they were the ones who were going to be owed the most money. But I think what it comes down to is this. Yes, they were going to be owed a significant amount of money, but I think what it came down to is the Braves felt that they probably could get that type of talent level at a cheaper cost, and that's why they decided to part ways with Laureano and Canning when it came to the money that they were likely going to be owed.
Yeah. So let's break this down by each guy. So Griffin Canning obviously came over in the Jorge Soler trade, and I tweeted at the time, a bunch of people tweeted at the time, that don't be surprised if this guy gets non-tendered at some point because he's going to be owed around $5 million. He's a 5th starter, kind of fringe 5th starter type, but he has no minor league options. And when you're a fringe 5th starter with no minor league options, that's tough. It's tough to roster that guy at all. But then Scott and Brad brought up the point that, the Braves could have just dumped Soler for nothing. So they brought Canning back. So maybe they like him. And that was a valid point. It was 100% true. Well, we get to today and obviously they non-tender him. And that's still a fair question, by the way. Why even add the guy to the trade if you're just going to non-tender him a couple of weeks later? And I will say this about that. Major League Baseball doesn't love salary dumps. They don't love teams just giving away players just to save money. They don't love teams just straight up buying players from other teams. And a lot of times they will include players that they have no interest in just to make the optics look better. I'm not saying that's what happened here, But I think the Braves wanted somebody that they could say, we traded Jorge Soler for this guy, but also have the option of getting rid of that guy for no money guaranteed. And that just makes the optics look better of the whole trade. It doesn't look like the Braves just salary dumped Jorge Soler, but the Braves salary dumped Jorge Soler. That was the whole point. Now there were reasons for that. The roster, the DH, we went over all that before the move happened. But yeah, the Braves salary dumped Jorge Soler. They wanted to clear his money. They wanted to clear his spot in the roster so they could do other stuff. And today was the final confirmation of that when they non-tendered Griffin Canning. So again, for him, when you don't have any options as a fringe fifth starter guy and you're making real money, it's tough to stay around. It just is. And, that was ultimately his fate. And then Laureano. So Laureano, I think, is probably the more interesting guy because Laureano was one of the best players on the team last year, one of the best offensive players on the team. He kind of saved the Braves' ass, quite honestly, in the second half when a bunch of their guys still weren't hitting. Obviously, the injuries. He was awesome, and he was only going to be owed about $6 million in arbitration. And a lot of people were thinking, he's talented. He's got some speed, he's got some athleticism, something this team doesn't have a lot of. Is it worth $6 million? And my point, and I tweeted this earlier today, was one, if he's going to be the weak side of a platoon, that means he's only going to get about 250 plate appearances. And paying that guy $6 million, that's real money. That's tough. Like that's ultimately going to be mainly a bench piece for you. And so that part of it, it makes sense that they weren't interested in that. But more importantly than that is the only two realistic spots on this team that you can upgrade on offense are shortstop and left field. We've talked about that ad nauseum at this point, that those are the two spots, and those have been the two spots for like 3 years now. And if you don't feel like you can do a lot at shortstop because there's just not a lot of options out there, and we've talked about that as well, about shortstop is maybe the hardest spot to upgrade, then really you're only looking at left field as a spot where you can really go get better. Left field or right field, depending on what happens with Acuna next year, but corner outfield essentially. And that being the case, do you want to commit $6 million this early in the offseason to Laureano when you're probably going to be aiming higher in terms of an upgrade somewhere else? And I don't, we'll obviously have to see what they do with this money saved. They saved about $12 million today total. If you go back and look with the whole Soler trade, they saved 13 million off his salary in 2025. They've cleared a bunch of money. Obviously Max Fried's money came off. Charlie Morton's money came off. Now there's some guys getting raises. Chris Sale gets a raise. Michael Harris gets a raise. Spencer Strider gets a raise. But they have a bunch of money coming off. I mean, they've got money to spend now. And I get people's frustration because the Braves haven't actually added anything. They've actually subtracted quite a bit. They subtracted Soler. They subtracted d'Arnaud. They subtracted Laureano. Honestly, those were three of the best hitters on the team last year, and they haven't added anything. And so I get the idea that Braves fans are kind of annoyed. It looks like they're just salary dumping money, but this is all unto something. There is a other side of the coin that's coming here. They're not just clearing money to clear money. They're not just going to sit on these savings. They're doing this so they can go do what they plan to do this offseason. And judging it now is judging a book halfway through. So we're going to wait and see what they do with the money before we make any judgments. But today's news, especially with Canning and Laureano, I mean, it was probably a 50-50 proposition. I could have made the argument either way, but it shouldn't have been surprising for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other name that I did not mention that the Braves did tender a contract to was Eli White. And I think that's a pretty good way to segue into, okay, where do we stand as of now? So I think the best way to paint a picture of proof as to why the Braves are clearly likely looking to make a significant move for the outfield is because as of right now, when it comes to your starting outfield for the Atlanta Braves in 2025, it's going to be Michael Harris in center, flanked by Jared Kelenic in one outfield corner and Eli White in another outfield corner. And I think that another name, they signed a Carlos Rodriguez today to a contract as well, a former minor leaguer with the Brewers who has a pretty intriguing approach at the plate. He may be your fourth outfielder. The point that I'm getting at is I'm not going to waste time sitting here trying to build up those guys. The truth is that is probably not an outfield that the Braves are looking to enter the 2025 season in with the idea of contending. But that's what sticks out to me the most as far as, okay, what does the decisions today mean for the bigger picture? It means that Laureano is not in the equation as of right now, but you really only have one starter when it comes to the Braves entering the 2025 season as of now when it comes to their outfield, which to me paints a clear picture that not only could there be one move, there could be multiple moves that could come down the pipe this offseason for the Braves outfield.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they've cleared is obvious room to upgrade in multiple outfield spots. And Kelnick has a minor league option left. So technically he doesn't have to start the year in Atlanta if he doesn't have a good spring training. Obviously, he did not have a good year last year. That's been well documented at this point. And if Cunha is not going to be ready till May, they could go get two outfielders. Absolutely. It would not surprise me at all. I do still think there's smoke on the Willy Adames stuff for shortstop, but that's going to cost a lot of money, and you're going to deal with a lot of other suitors who are very interested in him. And so outfield is just the easiest spot to upgrade. It's the most obvious need. There's a ton of options out there. We've talked about this before, but corner outfield is a very easy spot to go get better. One of the easiest versus shortstop, which is probably the hardest. And there's a bunch of trade names out there. There's a bunch of free agent names out there. And it would not surprise me at all to see them go get multiple guys at this point. It really would. Now, they paid a lot of money to get Kelnick last year. He's still got a lot of years of team control. He's still cheap. He's still got talent. So it's not going to stun me if they say, you know what, Jared, we're going to give you the first 100 plate appearances until Ronald gets back to give you one more chance to show us what you can do. That's probably a pretty good use of the asset since you spent all the money to get him. And he's still athletic. He's still got some speed, which, again, this team doesn't have a lot of. So it wouldn't stun me to see Michael Harrison center and Kelnick and right to start the year, and then whatever addition they make in left. But they're going to make an addition. I'm almost certain they did this for a reason, and that's to go get better at one of these spots. And if they don't go get a shortstop, then I don't think there's any doubt they're going to get an outfielder no matter what at this point. So it's just how good, how big a name, how much money, where do they sit in the lineup, all that stuff. And obviously we'll have those answers when we get the actual name. But yeah, I mean, this very clearly opened up a world where they're going to get a starter. They need another starter, and they're going to get an outfielder because they need another outfielder. And they've cleared a bunch of money to do it. It's kind of like they've set the table, right? Like they've cleared all the money they can clear. They cleared Travis. They cleared Soler. They cleared these ARB guys. I don't see really any money. I don't really see anywhere else on the roster that they're going to clear money. I doubt very seriously they would, trade away Iglesias or anything like that. One of the more obvious spots, but yeah, I think this is all the money they're going to clear. And now it's time to add back to the roster, start building the 2025 roster. And that's kind of, I think from this point to the end of the offseason, I think that's where we're now at, where we've cut the money. Now it's time to add what we're going to add back.
Beyond the outfield, I think the other aspect of the team that, was, I don't know if most impacted is the way to put it, but it was most in the focus when it comes to today's decisions was the bullpen, right? Because last year the Braves made last year's deadline day was actually very busy. Last year's deadline day, that was the day we traded Mike Soroka in the deal that brought us Aaron Bummer. We also traded Kyle Wright, made another move as well. But today, we in that offseason as well, we also acquired Ray Kerr. And last offseason, the Braves made it a point to get some good left-handed depth for rotation as well as the bullpen. Of course, Ray Kerr, unfortunately, it seemed like the Braves certainly did, think highly of him. He unfortunately, went, under Tommy John surgery and had that, towards the middle of last year, but he was non-tendered today. I imagine that he'll probably be brought back on a minor league deal. But even more importantly is the players that are going to impact the Braves in 2025. Dylan Lee, again, pretty cheap contract, no brainer. I'm wouldn't even be surprised if we would possibly extend him this offseason at some point. But you've got him and Bummer as being your two options out of the bullpen. We'll see what happens when it comes to Mentor, or they're adding another left-hander. Griffin Canning was someone that I think some speculated could have a role in the bullpen if the Braves wanted to try that. But like we're talking about the outfield and the decisions today that were made, showing that the Braves likely are going to make a move, and a significant one for the outfield, I think today also showed that there are some openings in that bullpen, and it's likely going to be something that Alex Anthopoulos looks to target to add, at least a relevant arm to the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as they lost Joe Jimenez, they're in the market for a high leverage, not just a reliever, but a high leverage. They need somebody that can pitch the 8th inning right now. Dylan Lee's very good. Aaron Bummer's very good. I mean, famously on this podcast, we've, sung the praises of Aaron Bummer, and he's very good. I like him a lot, but I don't know that Snit agrees with that. So, and they need more right-handed power arms in the bullpen after losing Jimenez. So, yeah, the Braves are going to be in that market. I mean, they're just going to be. I don't know if they're going to be in Camilo Duvall. I think the Giants are probably going to trade him. Ryan Helsley, he's got 1 year left with St. Louis. There were some guys today that were DFA'd. Finnegan, Romano. There's some interesting names. Bullpen is another spot where it's easy. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of chances to go get guys. There's guys that are on other teams that maybe you like more, kind of like a Pierce Johnson, where you see something, maybe not having the best year, but you feel like they're better than that. You can go get some value. The Twins have talked about moving some of their high leverage guys to save some money. There's guys out there. The Braves are going to be in that market. And the Braves are going to get an outfielder. They're going to get a starter, and they're going to get a reliever before the winter's over. I'm 99% certain. I would love to say they're going to get a shortstop, but I don't know that. But the outfield, the starter, and the reliever, I'm fairly certain of. So, and the reliever is going to be of note. It's going to be somebody you've heard of, somebody who's pitched high leverage, somebody very good. So, the Braves have cleared their money. They know what they have to work with now, and the targets, the spots on the team that they need to improve are pretty clear as well. And now we're in the addition part of the offseason where we're just going to see who they target. Some of these guys that were cut today, they could be, I mean, if they want to go get Kyle Finnegan, I'll take that in a heartbeat. He's a very good pitcher. Those 99, well, I don't want to say very good. Very good is probably strong. He's a good pitcher. He can help you in the bullpen. He's a hard thrower. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what they do. But they're absolutely going to add to the bullpen. They're absolutely going to add to the outfield, and they're absolutely going to add to the rotation. So now we've moved to that part of the offseason.
Yeah, and the one other thing that stands out again, going back to the Jorge Soler trade and them non-tendering Griffin Canning today, is you're seeing polar opposites from last offseason, right? Last offseason, they were willing to take on money, mainly to get Jared Kelenic, and then many of the moves that they made subsequently from that were moving those pieces around to, either try to find more useful pieces or free up money or what have you. But now they trade Jorge Soler. They've declined the option on Griffin Canning. Again, we're coming to this team wanting to save money. And so we talk about these trades. We talk about, the idea of them potentially going after to get Willy Adames. But the other thing that I think that the Braves are kind of eyeing with, clearing out so much of this money is, I know that Alex Anthopoulos likes to operate early in the offseason, typically when it comes to November moves, but it also could be one of those things to where the Braves are trying to clear as much money as possible, where maybe they're going to be a bit more patient when it comes to the free agent market and potentially see if there are any guys who become undervalued because they stay on the market, for longer than people anticipate. I think that's the biggest thing to take away of all from today is the Braves just want to have as much money freed up as possible so that they can go in multiple different directions, since they probably are entering the offseason with more needs to build than they thought they did when the season ended a few months ago. Or excuse me, a month or so ago.
Yeah, and I'll say this, Braves fans still have a little PTSD from the way Liberty Media operated for a bunch of years, where they were pretty cheap. They didn't spend. And so when Braves fans hear save money, clearing money, saving money, they get a little scared. But the last 3 or 4 years, the Braves have been one of the highest payroll teams in baseball. Like, this is not the Braves of like 2014, where they run a $120 million payroll and they can't spend a dime more. Like, the Braves are a top 5, top 7 payroll team. and have been for the last couple of years. And Alex said payroll is going up, and they're not clearing this money just to save it, just so they can put it in the owner's pocket. Like, I know fans think that, and they get scared. They're like, oh, they're just gonna, dumpster dive and save all the money. You know, I'm not, we don't work for the team. We don't work for Liberty Media. If we thought that, we would say that. The last few years have shown this team is willing to spend money, aggressively spend money, have one of the highest payrolls in baseball. Like, they spend. And that was a reputation they earned about a decade ago. It's not a reputation they have now. In the last 3 or 4 years, they spend money. And I have full confidence that they're going to go out and spend this money. And, Alex is trying to win World Series. That, the Braves are in the middle of a championship contention window. They're not dialing back. They're not, retooling, they are taking money from one part of the team and trying to move it to another part. And the first step of that is to clear the money from the old part of the team. And now we move to the part where they're moving the money to the new part of the team. And that's where we're at now. So I know fans are listening to this going, oh, they're just being cheap. They're just trying to save the money. You're working with a 2013 understanding of Braves ownership and Braves spending. This new era, like, the Braves are one of the highest payroll teams in baseball. They don't live in like the Dodgers, Mets, but they're that next tier down of, they've been a luxury tax team the last couple of years. Like, they spend money, and I have no doubt they're going to spend money again this offseason. And now that they've freed it up to do so, Alex can go make the moves he wants. And that's what we're going to have to wait and see now.
Absolutely. And, we talk so much about the moves that the Braves will potentially make. But another thing that stood out to me this week in general, Stephen, Chris Sale winning his first Cy Young Award on Wednesday. It was revealed on Thursday that Marcell Ozuna actually finished fourth in the NL MVP voting. Chris Sale finished seventh. I think that was very good finishes for both of them, very well deserved. We talk so much about the moves that are going to be made, but what this week also reminded me of is that over the past 3 years, the Braves have had Marcell Ozuna, Chris Sale, Ronald Acuna Jr. win it, but also Matt Olson as well as Austin Riley finish in the top 10 of MVP voting. And the thing that I'm getting at is that we are returning all those guys, and we're going to have them for multiple years of control. I know that I'm just stating the obvious here. Everybody knows this when you think about it. But I think that when you take a step back and just realize, okay, that's a pretty good starting point. It was just a reminder that even in a year where things did not go the way that we had hoped that it would, there still is a lot of talent on this team. And if we can get them all competing and going at the level that we, can expect for them to play at, we're still pretty good. But first off, congratulations to Chris Sale. But I think overall, the recognition that he got as well as Marcell Ozuna got, it was certainly deserved, and a reminder of just how special both of them were this season.
Yeah, I mean, we knew it was, everybody knew Chris Sale was going to win the Cy Young. We talked about it when he won the Comeback Player of the Year. He was the best pitcher in baseball, frankly. And Marcell Ozuna, of course, carried this team all year, for a fourth place finish in MVP, certainly deserving. But you're right. I mean, this team is just, it's so unbelievably loaded. I mean, they've had 4, 5 guys finish in MVP voting. It wouldn't stun anybody if Spencer Strider one day finished in MVP voting. It wouldn't stun anybody if Michael Harris finished in MVP voting. It wouldn't stun anybody if Sean Murphy or Ozzie Albies went crazy one year. Like, they have so much freaking talent. It's crazy how much talent this team has. Last year, it went on the position player side. It all went to hell very quickly. And the pitching staff kind of had to hold the team together for the season, and they still made the playoffs. And there's a lot of teams out there that would love just one playoff run, and the Braves have made the playoffs for 7 years in a row or something like that. So a ton of talent. It's going to come back. We'll see what happens with Acuna and Strider in terms of what they give the Braves next year. But, Riley will be back. Murphy should be back. Obviously Olson and Ozuna. Michael Harris looks like he's ready for kind of his burst onto the scene as one of the best players in baseball. Tons of talent. And on top of that, the Braves are going to add. The Braves are going to add this offseason. I'm 100% certain they're going to add. We don't know the names yet, but they're going to add. They're going to be aggressive in a couple spots. And, when the season starts, this will be one of the favorites to win the World Series again, like they have been for the last few years. And, you know, don't take that for granted because it's not that way everywhere. Like go look at what the Colorado Rocky fans deal with every year, or, go look at what the Miami Marlins fans deal with, or Oakland, they're, this is not normal everywhere. And so, it is good to zoom out every once in a while and maintain perspective of how unbelievable this run has been for Braves fans. But yeah, 2025, the team is going to be very good. And now we're just waiting to see when these injured guys come back, what they give us. And we're waiting to see what Alex does to the roster to improve on the few spots where they do need to improve. And I know he almost certainly will. I would be stunned if he doesn't add a starter, a reliever, and an outfielder at some point in the next, 2 months.
And when you put it in the perspective of, okay, you look at the fact that we were up 3-1 on the Dodgers in the 2020 playoffs, unfortunately lost in the NLCS. We won the 2021 World Series, and yet we're 3 years and 3 disappointing playoff appearances removed from that. And yet we're still going into the 4th year removed from that World Series title as clearly a top 5 favorite to win the World Series as of right now before any moves are made. And so, again, that just speaks to, I think, just how deep and talented this team is. But I think another thing that, is worth discussing is the level of names that were not tendered contracts today. I know that we already mentioned several of them, but I think that also was kind of a, factor in the Braves not wanting to pay Laureano the $6 million, pay Canning the $5 million. It was that the fact is there are going to be options out there that make some sense. And Stephen, you mentioned a few of them. Jordan Romano really stands out to me as someone that could make sense because he was a draft pick of Alex Anthopoulos back in 2014. But when it comes to those names that are out there, are there 1 or 2 names that just, really stand out? I know you mentioned Kyle Finnegan, but do any of the outfielders make sense to you that could be an option for the Braves? Maybe too early to tell, but those of the players who are non-tendered today, I do think there are 1 or 2 who could be a real value for Atlanta if they feel they can bring them in and capitalize on maybe some previous success they had in the MLB. In MLB.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what they do. There's a couple of guys, Dylan Carlson got DFA today for the Rays. He's left-handed. He's a center fielder. He's got talent. He had a really bad year in 24. So, we'll see what happens. That's a guy that has some interesting. Brian De La Cruz has always been a guy that, has a profile that the Braves have looked for in the past, hits the ball really hard. His expected numbers has always been really high. So that could be a guy. Yeah, it was more about relievers today. Honestly, like you said, Romano and Finnegan are guys that I think the Braves would be interested in. But yeah, there's a few guys that got cut today. John Birdie, it was with the Yankees and the Marlins, is a really good bench piece, kind of a utility guy, plays everywhere. Had a good season last year. I wouldn't be stunned if the Braves added any of those guys as depth pieces. I don't think I do think they'll aim higher than that to start with. I think they've got some actual real names that they're targeting at all these positions, but on the margins, no, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they went with some of those names and probably some more that we hadn't mentioned that they probably like a little bit. But yeah, I think they're going to aim higher to start with.
Absolutely. So what comes next is the question. And I think that really is what stands out. We're going into the weekend before Thanksgiving. Typically, it could be pretty active going into, Thanksgiving week. You don't necessarily see it, when Thanksgiving happens and the weekend immediately after, but especially as we get into that first week of December, I think that's really where action will pick up. So yes, still a few more days before we may start to see, some really, heavy, news dumps and moves being made, but we've already seen some pretty notable trades this week. I think it'll be interesting to see what eventually happens, and maybe the Braves will make a move before Thanksgiving. Stephen, do you have anything else for us before we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
Nope, that's about it. We just wanted to make sure we got on to talk about these moves, what they mean, the money that was saved, what they're probably going to do with that money, and now we're kind of in a waiting game to see exactly how they start adding back to the 2025 team.
Absolutely. And so we call it, just waiting on that blue square. We got it today when it came to the announcement of 2 additional hitting coaches to the Braves, but hopefully we'll get a couple of those blue square announcements before Thanksgiving arrives. For Stephen Tolbert, my name's Shawn Coleman. You can find us obviously below here on X/Twitter. You can find the Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, as well as Foul Territory. We are proud to be part of the family of podcasts under Foul Territory. Wherever you subscribe, that's where we'll be for free, and also on YouTube. Make sure you check out all the great content we have to provide. For Stephen Tolbert, my name's Shawn Coleman. We'll talk to you again soon. Go Braves here on the Hammer Territory Podcast.